you are quite familiar to the Stephen King's universe, having starred in one of the best adaptations of Stephen King novel. So do you see a connection, kind of like a bridge between the two?
Yeah, I've been asked that question a lot. I actually don't. Sorry to not be cooperative, but they're wildly different stories, and that's a testament to Stephen King and the talent he has to write in so many different genres. And the difference between Castle Rock and Shawshank is just so immense, even though Shawshank plays a part in Castle Rock. I just view them as completely different.
But the feel of the words, is it completely different for you?
The feel of the what?
The word, the the Stephen King, words.
The world, yeah.
Yeah, kind of like the autumnal feel or the creepiness or,
That's not in Shawshank.
Have you met Stephen King?
Yeah, once, many years ago.
What did you ask him? Did you ask him about, any insight into the writing?
No, I just told him I loved his writing.
What did he say to you?
Not much.
Not much.
What can you tell us about your character?
He's kind of like the town capo, Don.
Okay.
Without the, it's kind of a rural Maine gangster.
Was this meaty for you? It doesn't sound like something you've like.
Yeah, it's not a role I've played a lot. And it's something I grew up with, in Greenwich Village, bordering Little Italy.
Yeah.
Well, a lot of my friends were, mafia wannabes, and the presence was around, that kind of guy, the local Don. So I saw how that operated. And kind of always wanted to play that guy, so it's a great opportunity.
Why didn't you end up with the other guys that you grew up with? So what saved you from?
What saved me from being a thug?
Yes, in a way.
Well, a good family, good parents, and the emphasis on others rather than self that was instilled in me. And I got lucky. And I often get asked about Shawshank and Dead Man Walking and this current documentary I've directed that's in the New York Film Festival now called 45 Seconds of Laughter. And they ask what my interest is or my propensity towards prison. And honestly, it's I don't see myself as that far removed from people that wound up in prison. Kids I grew up with that I hung with wound up in the system, and so I never really thought about people in the system as others. I felt maybe that they were less lucky. And then when you put into the mix the illegalization of marijuana in the 60s and 70s, and how that led to a prison population that's higher than any country in the world, you go, I have to just think there, but for the grace of God, go I. Well, there's people in jail for crimes we've all committed. In jail for 30 years for crimes we've committed. And there's something quite unjust about that.
Do you see the world as a better place with the legalization of marijuana, as you mentioned it?
Is the world a better place? I live in California, and it definitely is a better place.
Thoughts on when you were pulled back into the Stephen King universe? How did that come up? Were you excited about it? Had you been watching Castle Rock?
I had watched Castle Rock. I really liked it. How did I feel about being pulled back in? I just thought it wasn't necessarily being pulled back into the universe. It was this specific universe, and I liked what they were doing with it, and I liked the writing and the twists that were in the scripts that I read. Expect the unexpected.
Did you sign up right away as soon as that?
Well, I went and met with them.
Yes, I want to do this immediately.
I went and met with them and asked them where this was going.
Okay.
And the great thing about these long formats is that you start with an idea and it depends on how things go. So oftentimes the writers are surprising themselves as they go along, and so each new draft we'd get of a new episode there was always something in it that I didn't expect. So I like that.
How did you prepare for this role, since this is like a first role for you in this type of character? Like, what was your preparation like before shooting?
Well, he's dying, so one of the things I did was I did some research on that and looked at that, and I had to do a main accent, so I had to do a little bit of work there. But I gotta be honest with you, being the guy that's the curmudgeon is easy. It's hard work to be charming, particularly at 6 in the morning. And so it wasn't as much of a challenge as other roles I've had.
Refreshing.
You are a director as well, so when you are being directed, do you, do you push the director for tips that you would later use, maybe? Yeah.
No, I do. I keep to myself on that stuff, and I know from having directed that it's the last thing you want is an actor directing their own scene. So I am malleable, and I try to figure out how to best serve what the vision is. If there's something that I feel is not going to get at the truth of the character or the scene, then I'll have a discussion. But I've always done that from the start. I think it's the actor's responsibility to get to the truth, and if there's something in the way of that, then it's the actor's responsibility to fight for the truth.
Speaking of your start, you started out in teenage comedies like The Sure Thing.
Yeah.
Was it always like that? Could you talk to Rob Reiner about, if you had so when you were really...
Yes, It's always been that way. And by the way, the better directors want that. Because the better directors know that the actor is your arbiter of truth. And if the actor's just doing what you're telling them to do, you might be cheating yourself of something deeper, more fully realized about the character.
Did you like those teenage comedies when you were
in my generation, it was like a rite of passage to do those teenage comedies. Everyone had to do a Get Laid movie, and everyone had to do a Vietnam movie. Okay. So I did two. I did both. I passed the requirements for actors my age.
Well, then you made a movie about a circle.
That was an adult comedy.
I gotta grab and thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you guys.
Thank you.
So we've still got some energy to us. Yes.
Could we start off with you guys telling us about your characters in this universe and what you can tell us without spoiling everything?
Okay. Do you want to go first?
Sure. My character's name is Abdi Holwadag, and brother of Nadia Holwadag, and he got adopted by Aunt Meryl. And basically, we're just facing a lot of things, and it's like there's a mall situation. My stepbrother takes over the mall. I'm fighting over it. So overall, that's what I'm going to be doing.
This is a question for either of you. How familiar are you with the Stephen King universe overall?
Well, I suppose as familiar as most people are. If you're not an avid fan, I can't say I'm an avid fan or reader, but in terms of his stories and narratives, they're definitely something that's in consciousness and just folklore in our culture. So things like the Shawshank Redemption, they're just the constant narrative of the stories that we know. Stephen King, so yeah.
Well, I like Shawshank Redemption. And I'm glad, to be at the Stephen King's back with the man Tim. So, yeah. So,
What did you use to prepare for such? Because with Stephen King, obviously there's a horror, and Castle Rock is very tense and very stressful. What kind of things did you use to kind of channel that fear or channel that stress to get it on the screen?
Portray the characters. So, have you guys seen any of it? Oh, you have?
Well, we've seen season 1, not 2.
Oh, you haven't seen any of it?
No, not at all.
I mean, actually,
Yeah, we don't know you guys at all.
Because that's a very precise question.
Yeah, no, you're new to us.
So
There's a lot of tension.
it's based on Misery, so I've seen
So
Misery. Yes, the original. Yes.
Imagine what those things are. So very precise. So there's a lot of stress and tension, and I think just the preparation as an actor when you read the scripts is just going, where is this person from, what they've been through, and where they're at. And I think Dustin's written such wonderful, diverse characters that you kind of go, well, if you've gone through that and you've witnessed this, then what does that mean to you as a person? So that's how.
So almost like the character's PTSD from having trauma before and stress before.
Potentially,
how does that shape
life experiences, you know what I mean? Maybe they've stopped drinking coffee and that they're a little bit irritable that morning, do you know what I mean? Or maybe she has X amount of patients that day and someone hasn't got insurance, so she has to try and help someone in a way and she doesn't know how. So those things, just those human things that build a character, I think are really really important to look at as an actor, and then you get hopefully someone that's a bit breezy and a bit truthful that audiences can connect with.
Can you speak on how you're wound into the story more? Like, by the end of season 1, you get like completely destroyed. Every preconceived notion you have about the show is wrecked by the alternate dimension and whatnot. So, what can you say about your character's place in all of this? Like, how steeped are you in the horror? Is it more an intellectual position? Is it?
Well, you know, when the proverbial hits the fan in Stephen King's world, I think everyone kind of gets involved. So I think we're all very involved, and we're all trying to find a solution to these things that we're witnessing and experiencing. But there's also there's so much going on in the series. There's so many different narratives. And then individual journeys. So there's like a plethora of narratives that you can kind of that interweave into the main thing that happens. So we're all kind of part of it.
Yeah, I feel there's a lot of interconnection. Are you guys interconnected with anything already ongoing? Any of the storylines already ongoing? Are you already a part of that, and we're just finding out what yours is to that?
So we're the adopted children of Pop Melon. So we kind of fall into that world and what that realm is, and the drama that family brings to the narrative.
Does
that answer your question?
You just basically get thrown into the deep end of the pool.
And then we have to work shit out.
A lot of the characters having established histories through books or other projects or movies, and yours being fairly new to the Stephen King universe, did you get a lot more chance to explore that and build what you thought it should be?
Yeah, of course. You know, we work with Dustin a lot. You know, whatever that we can to change or make better in our situation. You know, they always help. We're really excited.
You really got to make it your own.
Yeah, I mean, not all, of course. Sure. Here and there,
yeah, it's great.
It's interesting actually, because I think there's pros and cons to the two. Because if they were characters penned by Stephen King himself, then you kind of have this framework that you can build upon.
Sure.
But then it's also quite freeing to go, we can create these characters based on what we know in their background and their history and where they're at right now. So that's also a good thing. So this both has its benefits and its kind of cons as well.
It's interesting.
Do you think it's easier or harder to work in a TV time frame where there's a longer time to tell a story with a horror narrative? Like, is it easier to bring yourself into that headspace for a movie that's more condensed, or is it easier when you've got more time to explore that?
Well, the good thing about a movie, if it's a short period of time, you can let it go a lot earlier. Whereas if it's a TV series that's you're constantly having to provide the energy for these narratives that are quite intense, like you imagine it to be, then it can take a lot from you, but that's the job, that's the work. So, and it's also a real privilege to do that. So
During the filming process, did you guys Go ahead. So during the film process, what did you do to kind of help, after doing maybe doing a really intense scene and knowing you kind of had to keep going with that over the course of a week or so, what did you do to kind of come off of that when you yelled cut and you got to take the rest of the night off?
It's work, and then you go home. As simple as that.
What was what drew you to the project when you first read the script? Like, what kind of brought you wanting to be part of this project?
Well, I watched Castle Rock season 1, and I liked it. So, yeah, I liked it. And
simple as answer.
Sometimes it's just that simple.
I liked it as well.
I liked it, and I was excited to, get the chance, and I get to read episode 1, and it was good. It was good. So that excited me, and it's technically my first TV show. So that was exciting. I wanted to
like dive in.
Yeah.
She's Somali, that's my background. Like, I'm ethnically Somali, so it's really great to kind of have a female Somali that's not there, like an East African just billowing in the wind. She's got a job, she's got opinions, she's an American, she's a doctor. So just to see someone that has these mixed identities and is just trying to be like, that's a privilege. So I particularly really love the fact that there's a 3D Somali woman that's in the script, and it's just a woman. So I like that.
Yeah, there's a connection already for you.
Yeah, it's just you know how it is in scripts. Sometimes they can be very 2D, just a buffer for situations. This was a good person to kind of try and embody and bring her truth and her reality to existence.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Let's start with your characters. Let's start with your character.
Yeah.
Tell us about your character.
I play Chris Merrill, Ace Merrill's brother. Chris is not from the Stephen King world originally, so it's a new character. And the Merrill family is kind of at the heart, or at the base of Castle Rock. They kind of run the town in a way. And Chris is, I think he's got good intentions, and he's doing his best to keep the family and the community together while there's a lot of bad things that are going on. But yeah, I think he's grounded, and I think he's there to kind of keep the family town together. That's the best way I can put it.
Yeah. And I play Ace Merrill, who was famously played by Kiefer Sutherland, and I just tried to mimic exactly what I imagined he would have become. No, I mean, I think that it's a little bit different, but I think the writers were very clever, and they left, like, he's exactly who you think he probably turned into. Like, that's what happens to that guy, is that's where he's at. He is angry, and and I think there's a struggle. Yeah, definitely misunderstood. I think there's there's sort of a battle for who's going to take over from Tim Robbins, who plays Pop Merrill, who's their uncle, who's kind of helped raise these two boys, along with two brother and sister who are Somali. These two Somali kids are Barkad and Yusra play, and the four of those kids raised by this guy, they're the kind of criminal element of the town, and the children all are on various sides of that line of non-ethical and ethical, and there are two that are certainly more ethical than the other two, but we're all kind of testing each other's loyalties, I think. Like, who are you loyal to?
Can you talk about, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was saying, could you talk about the relationship between the two of you on the show?
I mean, I think different things anchor both of them, and different things drive them and keep them in town. I think their relationship is pretty tumultuous, but I also think there's a love there that's pretty deep-rooted because Pop is actually there. He adopted them, so we're actually nephews. So in their world, I think these two brothers probably at times in their life were the only things each other had. So I think that really, is hooked into them pretty deep, despite all of their, differences and disagreements and, the constant.
Yeah, and I think that one of the things that they do on this show is, even though it's amidst lots of horror and all this sort of genre-specific things there's a real emphasis on trying to actually explore the relationships between the people, and one of the relationships is ours, and I think it is complicated. I think they're both wrestling with the fact that they're this team, they're this brother team, and there's some disapproval about how each one is behaving in this team, which has to do with loyalty and whose side are you on, and I think that there's a lot of that. There's a lot of you can really see why they're unhappy or or less unhappy. Yes. Those are the two choices. Just like unhappiness or less unhappy.
And you'll see that throughout the entire season. It's kind of a thread.
Are you allowed any creative introspection with your character, going from an established character into the evolution of it?
Well, I don't know how much of it was allowed, but I certainly thought about it. I mean, look, it's not lost on me what fun it is to be doing this, to be playing these characters in this world. I'm aware that if I as a fan, I were watching it, that's what I would want to see. I want to see the connections. I want to see the history, even though maybe it's played by two different actors in two different films. It's to me that's interesting to do, and if you can find a way to do that and still be honest with what's happening and everything, then I think you're in my opinion, you're obliged to try and do that. So I tried to. There's some things in there.
Are you a fan of the Stephen King universe? You talk about Ace, and I think of Stand By Me, which is one of my all-time favorite movies. So you are familiar with a lot of it.
Yeah, I am a fan. I mean, I was saying The Stand is that's my book. That's my Stephen King totem. But it's impossible not to be a Stephen King fan. I mean, how can it's all over whatever you want. There's Maximum Overdrive, and then there's Shining, and there's all the things that are in between. And I've consumed all of them, either watching them or reading some of them. And so, I love it. We love him. I think he's
He was the first one that kind of introduced me to the horror genre. And so when that door was open, I love horror movies. When that door was open and I read Pet Sematary, which was the first book that I read. The ability to write these characters that people can relate to and that are humane in so many different ways, but these bizarre things happen to them in these bizarre worlds, I feel like is the reason so many people can relate to these characters. But when I first read Pet Sematary, it stuck with me for a long time, and I've read quite a few of his books through the years, but that was the one that for me, I still remember that kid's name too, Gage. Yeah.
I've always been impressed with him that he manages to write these really unethical people, these really morally compromised people, or people that are homicidal maniacs, Annie Wilkes. But there's a nobility somewhere in there. There's a thing they're reaching to try and find that's possible. And so it's really confusing as an audience member to root for. I don't know how you'll feel when you see all the things that people are doing, but I think it's interesting that in a lot of his books, when I watch Misery now, there's a part of me that's like, I kind of get, like, she's cracked, you know, something's wrong, but like, she's really trying to do the best that she can. And I think that's a really interesting, he doesn't have a hatred for humanity, you know, and so therefore he cuts them to shreds. Like, he likes people.
I think that's the reason he's so popular among some of the
yeah.
You guys, I'm gonna have to rock then. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Hello.
What was the first horror film that you ever saw in your life?
First horror film I've ever seen. What was yours? I don't remember my first horror film, but the first film that like scared me, like ruined me, was Gravity. That movie messed me up. But I don't think it's technically horror. Which one's that? Gravity? Gravity's a Sandra Bullock? Like recent? No, like what? Oh. It was Alfonso Cuarón. Oh. I don't know. Anybody? Well, was it a space movie? Yeah, it was a space movie. Oh, I think Sandra Bullock was.
Oh yeah.
George Clooney was in that.
Yeah, George Clooney, yeah.
I think it was just the two of them the whole time.
Yeah. Anyways, that film ruined me. I feel like it was maybe The Omen, which really doesn't hold up, but is, as a kid, it was scary. Really? I tried to watch it recently. I mean, so when they do hold up, I get really excited. Like, I think Rosemary's Baby totally holds up, for sure. The Omen, like, for me. Sorry. It's a classic.
So I wanted to ask you about your character, but now I have to ask, what happened to your finger?
Oh, this?
Yes.
Now I need to come up with something, a better story about it. But Paul Sheldon bit it off. Paul Sheldon himself. My dog's leash, not my dog. My dog wouldn't bite me, but ran and tractable and
So Lizzie, on the show, your character is really interesting because in addition to struggling with like mental illness, she's also, I mean, you know, pretty violent. But like, I'm thinking specifically of the scene with the ice cream scoop, which really messed me up.
Good.
But so, what was it like, kind of getting into the mindset of Annie Wilkes? Like, did you do any research? Did you watch the Kathy Bates movie? Did you read the book? You know, what was it like, kind of getting into that mindset of someone who's, you know, kind of fucked up, but is trying to not be so fucked up?
Yes, it's. I had seen the movie before and read the book before this came around, so I just kind of re-educated myself with all of that. But that's who Annie one day becomes. And Misery is seen through the eyes of Paul Sheldon. It's 100% his point of view, especially the book. Like, you really see her as just like a straight up kind of villainous woman. Our story gives more dimension to Annie. So even though I knew and I'm very familiar with where she's going, everything that we came up with here, you know, where she came from and how she kind of developed into that was all brand new. So it was kind of taking it as its own thing, its own original content. And yeah, I found it really easy to slip into that level of insanity, and then I didn't really take it home with me, so I don't know, I found it like really rewarding. There's something nice about not trying to look pretty or be sexy and just like be fucking bonkers. It's like really lucid.
Go crazy.
Yeah, it's true.
Have you ever taken a role home with you, and you just couldn't stop it at the, you know?
Yeah, I think that's probably the closest thing to like a process that I have. Like, I try to think as that person all the time. It just sort of seeps in that way. The music that I'm listening to, all of that. With this, it was a different can of worms.
Can you give us like an example when you took home the role?
I remember when I first started doing Masters of Sex, I only listened to music from that era. I changed my posture. I thought about what she was thinking about all the time. It became very real for me. But also, at that point, I lived alone. I was single. Like, I could give everything to that. It's more difficult to do that when you're career is the job portion of your life and not the life portion of your life. I prefer it this way.
It will be scary to take home this character, right?
Yeah. It's scary for some people, like my husband, probably.
Can you talk about the relationship, the mother-daughter relationship you had on the show?
I mean, Joy and Annie, deep down, do have like a very sweet, loving relationship. Because, I mean, despite whatever Annie deals with, she is a good person who has noble intentions. It's just the way she goes about accomplishing those intentions is often not right. But yeah, I mean, like Joy's trying to be her own person. She's a teen. Also, Castle Rock, like the town, just messes with people, which is not great for their situation already. Yeah, and they have a lot of factors, but yeah, and there's ups and downs.
Like any mother daughter.
Yeah. Well, I mean, like Annie Wilkes is a very particular person, but I think if you put a lot of other mothers and daughters in the same circumstances that they have, it would also be like just as terrible.
I think that's true. I think we all have a little Annie Wilkes in us.
I think I have a lot of Annie Wilkes.
How much feedback did you or you were able to give to the show in portraying your characters versus what was written in the script? Was there things that you could kind of add to your characters as you were filming it?
Yeah, they were very Dusty, who I think was just here. He is super collaborative, really, really open to hearing anything, and the majority of the directors as well that we worked with, they're just open to letting us try stuff out. So yeah, we did have a lot of say, but also it's very much like his vision, and it's kind of nice to just be there helping to execute his.
Yes, be a gear in the machine.
Amen.
Yeah.
Did you have to audition for the role? Did you have to make, just try out some scenes?
I didn't audition, and so the first time I kind of did what I was planning on doing with the character, I guess was at the first table read, but really on set. So that was scary.
Yeah. No, I mean, I also was very fortunate and was offered the role pretty much hot off the 8th grade train. But it was terrifying for me because I hadn't worked in over a year and a half, and it was terrifying. But it was a smooth transition, and it was a wonderful role to portray. And I got to meet this whole mother sucker.
Who's your favorite monster for you? It can be in literature, movies, or politicians. You choose.
My favorite monster is, I don't know. I mean, like, I think I find the horror I'm drawn to most is the ones about just people.
Yeah.
And dealing with, like, all the emotional trauma of stuff like that, and just, like, life. And then psychological and supernatural things happen because of that. But I was super into Us. I thought the Tether were like, I want like 1 million sequels to Us.
Yeah.
I want like an extended series.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Us is great.
So who's your monster?
I don't know. I mean,
real monster.
I was
full time.
Yeah, I was a big Medusa fan growing up. I like the Babadook. I love his.
That was creepy.
You know, he's a gay icon.
Yeah,
it's the greatest thing in the world. I love that.
Well, it kind of ties into Stephen King because he's now being shipped with Pennywise as well. So
yeah,
it's a big thing. So
I should get Bill Skarsgård on this.
Yeah, the king of all of this. Bill Skarsgård.
Gay king.
For your character, can you speak to what it's like to be a teen growing up in a town with all of this chaos happening? I mean, is it completely desensitizing, or is it like horrifying at all times?
I mean, both. I mean, I think the real scary thing about Castle Rock is you just don't see it. Like, that's why people have this kind of cyclical, or just a cycle of like awful things happen and then life goes on. It's because you just you don't see it. So I think for part of Joy, part of her whole relationship with her mother is realizing that her life is not completely right. But yeah, I mean, I think part of it is desensitizing. But I mean, there's so much going on, and for a teenager who's young, it's hard to just explain your feelings, And I'm saying that as Joy and Envy. I'm only 12. I think there's so much going on, and she's just like going through feeling and not feeling, dealing and not dealing, and wheeling. She's definitely not wheeling.
Yeah. Was Kathy Bates an inspiration in any way?
Yeah, of course. I mean, I think it would be kind of silly not to.
Did you talk to her?
No, I have never spoken to her. I've never met her. I hope to one day.
Did you feel any added? Sorry.
No, go for it.
Did you feel any added pressure? Because Kathy Bates is one of like playing that role is so iconic and colorful, and the sayings I think in the trailer that she says in the movie, it's kind of like linking the two.
Yeah.
Did you feel like added pressure to kind of fulfill that?
Absolutely.
That role?
She was amazing in Misery. I mean, it's like an objective fact that she's incredible in that movie. That performance is so next level. A well-deserved Oscar. And she got an Oscar for her first movie job. So, yeah, a little added pressure, for sure.
You guys are going to have to wrap up.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
So what are you allowed to tell us about season 2?
I might be allowed to tell you more than the others. So I can, as I'm sure some of our other friends have told you, season 2 is the story of what happens when this iconic villain of Stephen King's, Annie Wilkes, crashes into Castle Rock. And in the trailer, there's that moment where Tim's character says, this town already had a host of problems, and now you brought your problems to us as well. And basically, we didn't really need those problems. So it really is the story of what happens when she comes in and into this powder keg and throws gasoline and a match onto the already ready to explode Castle Rock. But it's also a tale of two cities. It is a tale of Castle Rock and Jerusalem's Lot. Obviously, Salem's Lot is a setting that a lot of people love from the book of Salem's Lot, and the idea of this season was to try to kind of reinvent Salem's Lot a little bit and reinvent the relationship between Castle Rock and Jerusalem's Lot, and to show a kind of contrast of Castle Rock being a town, as we saw in season 1, it's sort of the town that time forgot, and people are not a lot of job opportunities, and a pretty empty town, versus Jerusalem's Lot, which is a very vibrant town now, having this Somali immigrant population that has come in and brought new life to a kind of dying main town.
Can you talk about so Annie in particular? I love that she'll do things that are morally ambiguous up front, and then she'll do other things that we're not sure if we've actually seen what she did. Like there's one scene in particular where she's got a knife over here and you're not sure if she just killed somebody or somebody else or not. Can you speak about her character in that respect? Like, is she meant to be morally ambiguous, or are we meant to just like root for her the entire time? Because I want to root for her.
I think part of what I always found interesting about the book of Misery and the movie of Misery is that it's all from Paul Sheldon's point of view. So it's like you have this writer who's very self-important, who has a lot of opinions about who he is in the world, and he sees this woman who obviously is doing some not so nice things to him, but right from the beginning he has like very strong opinions about her and and they're pretty negative opinions about her, and it fascinated me to think about who is that woman and what would happen if we kind of turned the story on its end and focused on her side of the story and how she got to that moment. And so when you ask are we supposed to feel for her, I really do hope, and I think Lizzie's performance will sort of bring people in and make them feel something for Annie in a big way. At the same time, she's still Annie Wilkes, and so there's still going to be those unpredictable moments, or those moments where she's cornered, where something happens and she lashes out, and that's just that's I think baked into the nature of who this character is. That said, I do think that a big change between the book and the movie and this season is that I do hope that, as you say, people will actually feel for her and feel for the things that she cares about.
Did Stephen King have any input into the creative process?
You know, when I first started thinking about and really talking about doing this as season 2, I wanted to make sure that we were on the same page about Annie, because Annie's one of his great creations. It's not like season 1 where he also had input, but we were inventing new characters. We were taking settings. This is like we were running right into the heart of one of his greatest creations. And so I wanted to make sure that he was happy with the direction that we were going. And so we talked first about like, what would she be like before, and where would she be in her arc of mental illness, in her arc of fandom, in her arc of obsession, and all of these characteristics. And he wrote me a long message that I blew up and I put in the writer's room. And every time we would sort of ask ourselves, like, well, what would Annie do in this situation? We would kind of look back at that and see, is there any guidance in this Bible, to decide. Yeah.
What was in the message?
Yeah.
In a nutshell.
What was in the message?
Yeah.
I can't give you all the contents of the message because they sort of, I think, give away too much about the experience of the season. But certainly he was of the mentality that Annie's pathologies began much earlier in her life, and even in the book and the movie you see this scrapbook that she's collected of all the terrible things that she's done. But I think for Stephen, even in the idea that we were sort of doing a prequel before she's done all of the horrible things, he was sort of pushing me to think about the way that she'd be struggling with mental illness, which is sort of at the heart of this season.
Was it a friendly message, or in a way a threatening that please don't screw this up?
No, Stephen's incredibly supportive and lovely, and he's the nicest guy in the world, and I think wants creators to kind of take what he started and do their own thing with it, but also is willing to share his feelings and I think likes the show. I know likes the show, so
he does.
So on that note, though, what was it like as a writer and a developer developing what is her psychosis, like knowing the end game, but putting life and depth to the mental illness? What was that like, having to create that, and where did you go to channel the ability to do that?
Terrifying, and I think that for me it was always about the idea that obviously people who have, if you go online you can see all the many diagnoses of Annie Wilkes, and people have tried to, psychiatrists have written articles about what is Annie Wilkes' diagnosis, and to me that always sort of it almost doesn't matter what her exact diagnosis is, because what I was interested in is usually people who struggle with mental illness, they truly struggle with mental illness. It's not just I accept my mental illness. They often have perceptiveness about their own condition, and I was always interested in the idea of a woman who was really fighting some of her worst instincts, who wants to be good, who wants to medicate herself and to not give in to those demons. And so that was sort of where we always started, was that you could really find yourself connected to her if you felt that she was struggling to be good.
You mentioned the Bible before. I'm curious if the Bible is a list of areas of the Stephen King universe that you are able to explore and fleshed out to how they would like you to explore them, or is it just a whole mess of ideas that you're allowed to get into? What is in this Bible?
Oh, sorry. When I said Bible, I really meant what Stephen said about Annie Wilkes, putting it up on the board, and that was our Bible for this season. And to your question of the larger sort of tapestry, yeah, I mean, of course there's some guidelines, but the truth is we've been able to, in season 1 we told this new story. It was sort of like writing a song in the key of Stephen King, but it was all new characters except for Alan Pangborn, and it gave us total flexibility to kind of do anything we wanted in season 1. Obviously, in season 2, we're taking Annie and taking Ace Merrill and taking Pop Merrill and sort of running a little bit more into the heart of some of the sort of iconic characters. And so, I think part of what we set out to do was to make sure in this story that we were being true to the creations that Stephen had created, and that we were honoring them and doing them in the right way. So, if anything, we had Bibles for this season that were, here's the Ace Merrill Bible, here's the Pop Merrill Bible, here's the Annie Bible, and of course we diverted from some specifics of details because in order to tell a new story, I think you have to do that a little bit and to change the timelines as we have a little bit. But it was always front and center of our mind, like every piece of characterization and character that Stephen had kind of laid out for us, that we would always return to those and make sure that we were honoring the spirit of what he tried to create.
Did you? Sorry, go ahead.
Stephen King, so he has some pretty hardcore fans, to say the least. Now, have you gotten any kind of negative feedback from somebody like upset about what you might have done with one of the characters?
Did you get an Annie Wilkes letter?
I haven't yet. I mean, I think I think that there were people watch season 1 and they have different feelings about the beginning and the end, and I think that it was interesting to sort of see people process that in different ways, and some people love it and some people hate it, and I think part of what was also interesting in that way, one thing that's fascinating is the fact that Stephen wrote Misery 33 years ago. Misery is a story about toxic fandom, and it is, but before anybody knew those words, he really, I honestly don't know if anyone else had written a story about a fan having, really, and captured the public imagination about a fan having gone too far. And, I think that I don't know if writing a Misery story, and by the way, and I can be a very critical fan of things too, and have my own opinions, and I didn't sign the Game of Thrones petition, but I was amused by it, so I think what Misery gave us a chance to do, and all of the writers a chance to do, was to kind of think about those questions that we, and that the time that we live in, and I think, and maybe not take it on in exactly the way that Stephen did, where she's obsessed with a writer, but instead sort of tell a different story about obsession and about love gone too far.
You guys, I gotta wrap, and thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.